All right, everybody. Well, welcome to 10 years of Allohak Menewi Lodge 57. This one's near and dear to my heart. I just moved up to Michigan, and I am the camp ranger at D-Bar A Scout Ranch now, which means I'm a member of Michigami 29. So to do this presentation on my home lodge and its first 10 years is going to be pretty exciting for me. So we're going to kick it off here with a couple Allohak Menewi fun facts. The lodge was formed in 2011 from the merger of Natchimawat 275 and Endalakahane 57. Ottaquag 540 was absorbed by the lodge in 2014. The first time the lodge gathered together under the new name was actually before its charter, so September 2011, and they provided a service corps to the first council camporee where members could sign up, and if they did at least 2 hours of service, they were given the first lodge flap. The first key three of the lodge chief was Christopher Cummings, who was also the last lodge chief of Endalakahane. The advisor was Jay Zimmerman, a member from Natchimawat, and the staff advisor was Dan Lynn, who was a council employee from Greater Pittsburgh Council. The camps they served were Camp Anawana, Camp Anderson, Camp Baker, Camp Guys Suda, Heritage Reservation, Camp Potomac's, Camp Seafmac, and Camp Twin Echo. The two camps highlighted in red are camps that the council no longer owns. Camp Twin Echo was closed and the lodge no longer serves it. And Camp Anderson is no longer a scout camp, but scouts can still camp there. So the lodge name means strong altogether, which is very fitting because when you look at this family tree here, we have 16 different lodges in the history of Allohak Menewi. Two big branches from the Pittsburgh side in southwestern PA, its southwestmost corner, and a small branch from down in Maryland and West Virginia, as well as a couple lodges from towards the center of the state a little bit near Johnstown and Altoona, PA. So the first item the lodge actually made was the sticker you see on the left of your screen. Just a vinyl decal window cling. They were handing it out when they picked the name, but hadn't designed a flap yet. It's one of those items that people don't really look for too much, but it's really the first item the lodge ever made. It's going to be the only item we cover that's not a patch or a neckerchief, something like that, just because it's the first item. On the right side of your screen, you see the first lodge flap, what we call the S1. It was designed by a guy by the name of Gap Danish, who was a member of Natchimawat Lodge. Our totem is the Eastern Mountain Lion, which you can see reflected on our standard lodge flap. And down at the bottom of the screen, we have the original artwork for it. One of the fun facts, which will come into play a little bit later, is if you look at the artwork on the left side of the flap, you see it's white and pink mountain laurel. But on the S1 first flap, it's purple. Purple was the lodge color from Natchimawat, and there was a little thing happening, with the merger, and the color became purple on the first flap. So 2012 is the first year the lodge is officially chartered. They kick off the year with Winterfest, which you can see we have a patch up on the upper left for. And we also issue our second patch, which is the what's considered the S2. It's the standard first flap, but we have 2012 stitched on the rock, and it is the same patch. I mean, we just overstitched it, and it was sold as a NOAC fundraiser with the last standard of Natchimawat and Endalakahane, and we overstitched 2011. 2012, we also had Conclave. We have our delegate and our trader flaps, as well as our NOAC set. And if anybody was at the 2012 NOAC, they've seen this set before. Nobody wanted it. It was a pain to trade. I remember the lodge gave us 30 traders and 10 delegates, and there were 20 of us there. And if we wanted to trade it, we had to trade both our delegate and our trader just to get somebody's trader. 2012 at the family banquet, we have actually run out of standards by this point, and we issue our new standard where we corrected the purple flower to the white flower. This would be used as our standard for about 5 years before we change it up. In the center of the screen is our first jacket patch. The lodge issued that in 2012, and they just ran out of it this year. So they made tons of those. They're everywhere, but it was the first jacket patch. Bottom left of the screen, we have our Conclave set from 2013. The theme for Conclave was Super Mario Brothers. and every lodge got assigned a different character for Mario, where the lodge chief had to dress up as that character. And we got assigned Princess Peach, so our lodge chief had to put on a pink dress, and we reflected that with the pink border on the flap, and the red border one is our delegate. 2013 National Jamboree, the lodge had a flap for it that was included as part of the council set. It's actually the bottom to our center patch. 2013 was the 150th anniversary of Pennsylvania's involvement in the Civil War. So the council had done like an Allegheny arsenal set, what we called it, just had a couple different weapons used during the Civil War. And the lodge flap, they decided to use an ironclad. 2013, we had another council camporee, and we did a lodge service corps, and we made the patch you see on the upper right corner. Same rules as the first service corps. You had to do 2 hours of service to get it. And it's one of the tougher items to get from the lodge. Not many of them were made, and the people that earned them held on to it. The end of 2013, we issued our first chenille. The keystone reflected that we were a lodge in Pennsylvania. It was a shape that really none of our former lodges had used for a chenille before. And the lodge decided that they would restrict it to one per year. You had to present your dues card to the trading post, and they would punch a hole in it to signify that you already bought your chenille. 2014, the lodge had the honor of hosting its first conclave, and they decided to host it at Camp Twin Echo. Camp Twin Echo hadn't seen a conclave hosted at it since 1993, so it was quite a challenge for us to get things ready for it, but it was a great event. We did the theme Echo the Past because we were gearing up for the 100th anniversary of the OA. And you see at the top of the screen, we have our flap set. The red border was our trader, and the black border was the delegate. They're not very rare patches, but the delegate's been becoming a bit harder to find as time goes by. On the left side of the screen, we have our Winterfest patch from 2014. We don't do a Winterfest patch every year, but we do a Winterfest every year. So we skipped a year, and they came back with the snowflake design for 2014. At the banquet in 2014, we issued our fundraiser set for the 2015 NOAC. It was our standard flap at the time, and we ghosted it in different colors of Mylar. They're very hard to see. Ghosted Mylar is tough to look at. But the bottom right corner, it's red Mylar with ghosted black. Red and black are the lodge's colors, so you see it pop up quite often. 2015, we start really issuing a lot of stuff. It's the 100th anniversary of the OA. Every lodge is making stuff. So at the top center of the screen is what we consider our centennial flap. The flap was actually put out in 2014, and it was intended to be ready for the banquet. Only problem was when they opened the box, it said 1915 to 2014. So those were closed up, sent back to Stadge Emblems, and they're all presumed destroyed. I'm going to say presumed in quotations because we never know. On the top right side of the screen is new standard flap. So Stadge Emblems became our provider for our patches as Raven embroidery closed. And whoever ordered the patches said, make the lion look more real. And they added the Centennial logo because anybody who did the ordeal in 2015 got this flap. We consider it one of the ugliest patches, so we stopped using that design in 2015 as the standard. If you look down at the bottom left of the screen and the middle of the screen, you're going to see our 2015 conclave set. The top two flaps have two Brotherhood arrows on it. Those are very common. It was our set that we issued to everybody at the conclave, and the company messed up by forgetting to put the Vigil triangle on the sash in the center. Our conclave advisor reordered that set, 115 of them, which was just barely enough to cover everybody who went to conclave to get one set that was corrected. And it is by far the toughest flap set from the lodge to get. 6 years later, there are still people looking for it, which is pretty uncommon for a fairly young lodge. On the right side of the screen, we have our Aero Tour patch. We were the last stop for the Northeast region before NOAC, so our lodge made a patch for it, and they did the event at Heritage Reservation right in the middle of our summer camp. So it was awesome because a lot of people attended it, and a lot of kids during their free time when they weren't doing merit badges popped over. And this patch was given to every lodge member who helped staff the event in some shape or form. 2015, we've got our NOAC set. It's the first time we've done a two-piece delegate and trader. as well as a single trader flap. The set was designed by Gap Danish, and if you look at the top flap there, you see 3 baby mountain lions, and right below each one of those mountain lions is the lodge numbers of the lodges that formed Allohak Menewi. Right side of the screen in the corner, we have our banquet patch from 2015, and then the paw print shaped chenille. It was actually issued in 2016. We were trying to order the chenille, and we did a whole big pre-order for it. We were planning on using Standard Pennant Company, but that was when all the stuff with the Standard Pennant Company and BSA licensing was happening. So we didn't end up getting them from Standard Pennant. They were delayed for almost a year, and we got them from Maritz Embroidery. They've become tougher to find as the years have gone by, but there were quite a few of them made. And it's the one chenille that we haven't restricted. You could buy as many of them as you wanted. 2016, we'll start off with the chenille. By 2016, we had absorbed Ottaquag Lodge, which meant our territory was no longer just PA. We now included West Virginia and Maryland. So we decided that the keystone shape was not really a good image to use to represent the whole lodge, but we decided that we would keep the paw print shape from our centennial chenille. Now, I was sitting at the executive committee meeting, and I will tell you, they talked for over an hour about the slight little changes we should make on the chenille compared to the centennial one, only to loop back to the original suggestion, which was the chenille you see here. The lodge still has them, and they restrict them 1 per year, just like the keystone. We also made a neckerchief for the first time. It's a piped neckerchief with a separate sewn-on patch. No patches were issued off the neckerchief, but it is our lodge's first neckerchief, and it was done via pre-order. There were 200 of them made, and I think in total there were 190-something pre-ordered, so it's a little bit harder to find. Allohak Menewi had a conclave they attended in 2016 that was Game of Thrones themed. They called it Game of Chiefs, and the top flap you see there with the yellow background was our delegate flap. We only made 1 flap for this conclave, which is unusual for our lodge and section, but we're trying to cut down on what we make for the event. 2016, we introduced our Summer Camp Service Award. Scouts could participate at summer camp by helping with 3 different things. It was attending a brotherhood ceremony, either by helping set up for it or participating in it as a brotherhood candidate. They had to help with the pre-ordeal ceremony, or call-out ceremony, not pre-ordeal, being a torchbearer or helping build up the fire for it, as well as do a camp service project. And if they did 2 of those 3 things, they could earn the summer camp service flap. The bottom of the screen on the left, you will see a standard flap with a black background. We ran out of the original Puma on a rock flap, and we decided that since we had absorbed Ottaquag Lodge after we decided that was our standard, that we would open up a competition for a new standard flap design to include the brothers from the southern portions of the lodge. The stipulations for that competition were the top 5 flaps would be voted on by the general lodge membership. The current standard flap would automatically make it to the top 5. Turns out we only actually had 4 designs submitted. It was the one you see for the summer camp service flap, the current standard flap, one that was just a mountain lion head with a gray background, and then the one you see on the bottom left, which ended up winning and is still their standard today. On the right side of the screen, we have our family banquet set from 2016. The lodge started doing a tradition where if you brought to encourage people to bring their families to the event, they would give you an extra patch if you brought a guest. So the red patch was issued to everybody who attended, family members and scouts, Order of the Arrow members. And the black border patch was issued only to the member that brought his family. So the lodge started doing that in 2016. And the fun fact about this patch set, it was actually designed and approved for the 2013 banquet, but because the lodge decided to make a patch like 2 weeks before the banquet, there just wasn't enough time. But they ended up recycling the design in 2016. 2017 is the lodge's 5th anniversary. They made a ton of patches, really from 5 to 10 year mark is where they made a lot of the majority of their stuff. The flap you see on the upper left with the black background, that was our dues paid flap. So you had to pay your dues or do your ordeal in 2017 and you got that flap. The one below it was sold in the trading post, And oh my goodness, they made so many of them. Myself and a buddy from camp, we designed them together, and the lodge made 3,000 of the red background one. They just sold out of them last year in the trading post, and that was only when they bumped them down to being 1/4. And we were giving them away. If you bought $5 worth of stuff, they handed you 25 of them just to get them away out of there. Uh, it's an okay patch, extremely common, and I wouldn't be surprised if everybody here on the call has one already. 2017, the conclave was Lego theme. They called it the Building Blocks of Brotherhood. And we have our trader flap with a yellow border and our delegate flap with a blue border. So they went back to doing 2 flaps for that year. In the middle of the screen, they have their Winterfest patch. The theme was Arrow Wars, so kind of a Star Wars, not Star Wars themes because of copyright issues with patches. But it was a great event, and the youth had a lot of fun. So on the right side of the screen, you're going to see another summer camp service flap. We ran out of flaps and had to reorder. And of course, you know, when you reorder a patch design, there's always the risk that it's slightly different. Well, this one was very different. Not only were the colors a lot more bright and vibrant, and some of them were a little bit darker shade, they completely forgot the ghosted W's. So if you look at the zoomed in image on the bottom right of the screen, on the mountains, on the first flap, there were 3 ghosted W's, and on the second run, they completely left them off. It is actually one of the tougher flaps to find from the lodge. They made it for 1 year, and when they reordered, they made sure that they had the W's on it. And this one was a very low reorder quantity. 2017, we had a jamboree, and an artist from Western Pennsylvania who does a lot of Native American art and French and Indian War art gave us permission to use his designs for some of our patches. So they made 2 flaps for the jamboree, and they did a photo sublimated patch. The one thing I find funny about it is if you look at them, you notice we completely forgot to put 2017 National Jamboree on it. So we always get people asking, what on earth did you make these for? On the left side of the screen, you see a chevron that looks like it would fit with our 5th anniversary flap. This was made for Puma Games, which was the lodge's summer social, always a big event they'd hold at Camp CFMAC, and it's where they do their lodge elections. The design was inspired by the current lodge staff advisor's cat named Cricket. They made 100 of these patches, and there were 98 people at the event. This, when you include everything made from Allohak Menewi, is the hardest patch to find. It's probably the ugliest patch we have, but it is the hardest patch to find. I've never seen one up for trade. I've never seen one hit eBay. Everybody that has one holds on to it just because they think it's funny because it had the lodge advisor's cat on it. So they did a banquet again in 2017, and you can see that we have 2 patches yet again. The silver border was for all participants, and the gold border was for those who brought guests, and they used the fork, knife, and spoon and sashes as a way to make a 5 for the 5th anniversary. Brace yourself for 2018 because they made a ton of patches. I will admit that I'm, responsible for a lot of them as I used to order and design a lot for the lodge. We kicked off the year with Winterfest, and the theme was Winter Fiesta, which you can see our comical patch there on the upper left. And then we introduced our Langamat program. The lodge had an Langamat program for quite a few years where it said anybody who does a Langamat service gets a patch. But nobody really read the fine details of the program until one kid just happened to bring it up like, hey, we've been using this program for a couple years and I never got my patch. So we made the Langamat service patch. It's tougher to find, but they've been using it for quite a few years. And the way you earn it is just being in a Langamat. It's part of our continued Langamat program where you could potentially earn a black sash for converting some more deal members to Brotherhood over a period of time. But the patch is the basic recognition. 2018, the Order of the Arrow Northeast region hosted Arrow Corps Puerto Rico at Camp Oaxaca in Puerto Rico to help rebuild the camp after Hurricane Maria. The lodge decided that we would send 3 members down, and we had a private donor make flaps for us based off of the Yokahu 506 F1. The flaps, there were 100 of them made, and 50 of them went with the 3 guys who went from the lodge, and the other 50 went to the lodge trading post to be sold to recoup the airfare that the lodge decided to pay for the 3 members that went. Below that is our summer camp service flap that's still being used today. You can see the W's have made their way back onto the flap. This is the most common of the three because it's been used since 2019 or 2018, sorry. 2018, the lodge got to host Conclave again, and we hosted Heritage Reservation for the first time as Allohak Menewi. We did 3 flaps. The top one was our trader flap, the middle one was the delegate, and the bottom flap was for the staff. The lodge had some rules for it. You had to either participate in one of the 2 setup weekends and staff the conclave, and they would give you the flap. That makes it sound like it's a harder to find flap. It's not. There was a mishap with the ordering, and there were way too many of them made yet again. So it's a very common, easy set to find. I think you can buy it in the trading post for $5. Whole set, even the service flap. NOAC 2018, the lodge decided to make a fundraiser set, and they were going to remake a flap or patch from every lodge that was in our lodge history. So the set was based off of every lodge's first flap, and there are some very bad inconsistencies when you compare them to an original flap. You'll see a little bit later in the presentation some prototypes for this, but it was ordered from the National Supply Company, and they never actually did artwork. They just started taking designs and making prototypes and sending them to us, and it was a lot. It was about a 4-month process trying to get everything to the point you see it now, which is absolutely by no means what exactly I had a vision for when I ordered them. But they sent me prototypes, and they were produced in quantities of 200 of certain designs we hadn't approved, and they told us that there's no way that any patch company could ever make a rolled edge flap, so that's why everything's cut edge. We all knew that was a big load of malarkey. So this is what we ended up with. The set was sold in 2 parts. Any lodge chartered before 1950, that patch was sold for $40 in its set, and all proceeds went to NOAC. Any patch made after, or any lodge chartered after 1950, those were a separate set, and they were sold for $40 with all the proceeds going to NOAC. Some of them are a lot better looking than others. Mahonchgu Lodge 275 and Wissawanik Lodge 347 never actually had a patch. So those ones were based off of a historic set that the National Lodge had made for their 35th anniversary. So those are the 2 best looking ones from the whole set. Kayasutha is not too far off, and Tanacharis is pretty close. The other ones I could talk for hours about. 2018 NOAC, we create a lodge flap set yet again with a single trader, a trader flap, and a delegate flap. Our theme this year was summer and winter. The summer flap is the trader, and the winter flap is the delegate. What's kind of neat about the single trader patch you see up top is there's a member of Michigami Lodge 29 who was originally in Allohak Menewi, and when the lodge was merged up in Michigan, they actually used this design to base their standard lodge flap on because he really liked the patch that his original lodge had. So I'm still trying to find the kid up here because we were both from the same lodge, but little fun fact for that flap. The right side of the screen, you see the banquet set right there. We have a black and a white border. The black border was issued to all participants, and the white border was issued to those who brought a guest. They have a little bit of a Western theme because the section conclave that year was a cowboy theme. 2019, the lodge brings back doing a Winterfest patch yet again, and this year the theme is Movie Fest. So we have our totem wearing some 3D glasses, which was pretty awesome. A very nice patch, if I do say so myself. And the lodge had to reorder their standards. So if you look at the middle of the screen, we have the same standard design, but the companies were changed. The shape's different. There's more gray than white. So that is the new standard they're currently using. On the right side of the screen, you'll see another neckerchief. The lodge decided that after a few years of not having a neckerchief, they wanted a neckerchief again. So they brought back the same design. This time there's no piped border and it's direct embroidery. And that's a result from the company they used. The lodge just sold out of those a couple years ago, but same neckerchief design. Bottom left of the screen, the conclave theme for NE4B that year was honoring brotherhood, sacrifice, and service. So it was all about honoring first responders and military members. We had a bunch of former lodge members from all over the section that were chiming in for the opening show and all that to say where they were serving, what division or branch of the military. It was a really cool event. So our lodge decided to do a kneeling soldier at a veteran's cross for our set. The gray and black one is our trader, and the red, white, and blue is our delegate. 2019, both of our summer camps were celebrating a significant anniversary. Camp Seafmac was celebrating 85 years, and Allohak Menewi was not Allohak Menewi, Heritage Reservation was celebrating 40 years. So the lodge decided to do something slightly different than the summer camp service flap. They made the camp anniversary service flap, and you had to do 8 hours of service at each camp to earn the flap. You could earn as many as you want. And they decided to put a dollar figure on it too. So you could buy them, I think, for $200, which is what they sort of viewed 8 hours of service being worth. Most people, I think actually everybody that got one, minus one person, all earned theirs. The lodge had a couple extras left over when all said and done, and they continued using the award a few years afterward. But it was a really popular program. The designs mirror each other. It's the same design. They just flipped it around. Down on the bottom right of the screen, we have our lodge family banquet set. Yet again, same thing, 2 patches for a one-day event. We've got the purple border, that's for anybody who participated, and the nighttime scene black border is for anybody who brought a guest. 2020. So everybody knows about 2020. This is our NOAC stuff. Before I get to that, though, the patch in the middle is our Allohak Menewi Luau 57. Our Winterfest theme in 2020 was Luau theme. That's the patch that was made. It was one of our highest participated Winterfest in quite some time, which was great because the lodge was trying to rebuild and we were getting a lot more members to things right before COVID. But that event happened, and it was the only event to happen in 2020 before the summertime was almost over. On the left side of the screen, you see our NOAC fundraiser set. It was a 4-patch set that included a council patch that said NOAC 2020, and it was our standard lodge flap with some additions changed into a council patch shape. The 3 flaps that were included with it were to honor Camp Twin Echo. In 2020, Camp Twin Echo closed and was sold, and the lodge had so much history there. So the first flap has the DSA, the camp logo used at the time, and Anarchist Lodge's totem. Camp Twin Echo was the place where the DSA award for the OA was handed out for the first time for the 25th anniversary of the OA, and it was the last camp that the National Order of the Arrow Conference was ever held at. The flap in the middle is the current totem with the camp logo in the center, and the flap at the bottom is the 2 lodges that served Camp Twin Echo between its original lodge and its current lodge. 1928 to 2020 were the years Camp Twin Echo was open. The set was sold, and all proceeds went to fundraising for the 2020 NOAC, which never happened. On the right side of your screen, we were one of the lodges that we didn't order our patches after the fact of NOAC. We ordered ours and were one of the ones that, got stuck with them because NOAC was canceled. All the proceeds from both the fundraiser set and selling the 2020 set went to help fundraise for the 2022 NOAC, as well as potentially building some campsite pavilions at our summer camp. The sunset one is our trader. The nighttime scene, which all the white on the patch is glow in the dark, was our delegate, and the top single flap with all the ghosted text was the single trader. 2020 was another exciting, time, because during COVID, the only section, and maybe the entire country, but definitely the Northeast region, NE4B, held an in-person conclave. Our youth were 100% determined that the event would happen. It was postponed from June to August, and it became a one-day event rather than a weekend, but we were able to hold it. They called it the Wizarding World of Brotherhood theme, so kind of Harry Potter theme without the copyright, and every lodge was assigned a Harry Potter house. My lodge got assigned Slytherin, and you can't put Slytherin house on a patch without permission. So at the bottom right of each flap, we have, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but it's the Lenape words for green snake. The green border one was our trader, and the silver mylar was our delegate. One of the other events the lodge was able to have in 2020 was our summer social at Camp CFMAC. There wasn't a patch made for it, but the lodge did have some masks with paw print and 57 on it in the trading post. We were able to hold the banquet in 2020, and the blue border daytime patch was for everybody who went to the event, and the nighttime black border was for the people who brought a guest. Silhouette of a mountain lion with a mask. Very 2020. 2021, 2020 is over. We're on to a new year, and the lodge made a couple items. One of our rival lodges was celebrating their 100th anniversary. They had never merged, but Allohak Menewi, we had merged a whole bunch of times. But it was the 90th year of lodge number 57. Kuionic Lodge, the first Lodge 57, was founded at Camp Umstetter in 1931. So the lodge decided to keep up the fundraising for the campsite pavilions and make a flap celebrating 90 years of number 57 for our lodge. The lodge name is on the patch. It's ghosted below 90 years of Lodge 57. And on the right side of the flap, the Camp Umstetter logo is actually ghosted on it. And what's cool about it is it's the first time in almost, I'd say 70 years that Camp Umstetter was ever mentioned on any kind of insignia put out by the Boy Scouts. So really neat little callback for history. The design was based off of the original lodge insignia, which was a black round with a red circle and a red squirrel on it. So we sort of used that in the design for inspiration. 2021, NE4B had an awesome conclave. It was Wagyon Lodge's 100th anniversary, and we ended up doing what we were calling Conclave in the Commonwealth. We invited another section and brought the conclave from having 4 lodges to having 10 lodges and sort of reunited Western PA between its 2 sections to celebrate one big event. So the section asked every lodge to only make 1 flap, no delegate and trader, just 1 flap. And they asked them to keep the design simple. So Allohak Menewi decided to do a callback to their original standard flap and just put 2021 conclave on it. The year we were gearing up to fundraise for the 2022 NOAC. So we made a vigil flap. You can see here on the right side of the screen, ghosted between 57 and the W's and the fleur-de-lis, it says Vigil Honor. The flap was given to everybody who did their vigil in 2022 and sold in the trading post to vigil members. At the bottom of the screen, we have our banquet set for 2021. The white border that has the lodge name in gray in 2021 banquet was the participant patch. And the one on the right with the black ghosted writing was our bring a guest patch. We actually ran out of them and we didn't have enough to hand everybody. So it's already a tough patch to get. The lodge always sets aside 2 of every patch for their archives. And that year we were only able to set aside 1 just to make sure the youth who didn't get one was able to get one. Some of the adults who were at the event and brought a guest unfortunately didn't get one, but that was because we only ordered 75 of them. 2022 is the lodge's 10th anniversary. We got 10 years of insignia already, and they decide that they're going to make a big thing for their 10th anniversary. The flap at the top is the only 10th anniversary flap, and you had to pay your dues or do your ordeal in 2022 to get it. The lodge roughly had about 900 active dues paid members, and we estimated about 200 to 300 to do their ordeal. So there's only 1,200 made, which sounds like a high number, but it's been a trend for us in previous years when we do this dues paid flap and we make almost an exact number for the membership plus some for ordeals, that people hold on to them, and a lot of these go onto their uniform. No extras of them were sold. Potentially, if there are extras of the flap, they will be sold at the family banquet in November. They did an event set for almost every event we had. Winterfest, you can see on the top left. On the right side of the screen, we have the Puma Games. Now, Puma Games ended up being canceled in 2022. I'm not entirely sure of all the reasons why, as it was after I'd moved to Michigan. But what I do know is that one of the chapters ended up going to Camp CFMAC just to do some service projects. So patches were handed out to those guys. The spring weekends, they had 3 different events where they handed out the spring weekend patch. The fall weekends, there were 2 different events where the same patch was handed out. And the family banquet patch down on the bottom right is the first time anybody's seeing this patch because it wasn't handed out yet. It has not been handed out yet. It will be handed out the first week in November. The patch in the center of the screen was just a regular 10th anniversary flap. It was given to everybody in addition to the event patch when you attended your first event, and it was a little callback to our first standard flap. 2022, the Lodge had the honor of hosting the first Section E12 conclave. You can see that flap on the top left of the screen. We did a little red, white, and blue play on our 10th anniversary flap, swapping out the fleur-de-lis for an acorn, which was the camp logo for where the conclave was hosted. Below that, we have our conclave workday patch. That was given to anybody who attended the service day to help set up tents and all the canvas and everything for conclave, as well as some other projects. It was a very low attended event, so everybody who went ended up getting 2 of them, and all the extras were destroyed. There's not many of them. I want to say there's around 50 that are probably out there. And there were a few that were being traded at the E12 conclave, but that's to be expected when you hand everybody who came 2. But they really did a ton of work, so it was nice to recognize them. 2022, NOAC's back. We have down at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, which I'm sure a lot of people on this call were at. We've got 5 patch set. We got 2 2-pieces and a single trader again. The black border is our trader. The gold mylar border is our delegate. And the sky blue border was our single trader. Not many of them were made. It was a smaller number and a smaller contingent. The Lodge only had a couple extras that made it to the trading post. So it's a nice set. And from what I heard, it traded well at NOAC. The Lodge made a couple different items for the trading post in 2022. We had run out of our jacket patches and the youth were asking for a new one. So the design you see on the left was one that I'd been working on for quite some time, and finally we were out of jacket patches, so we released it. It's quite large. You can see in the center of the screen that we actually took 50 of them and sewed them on the neckerchiefs, as the Lodge was also out of neckerchiefs, and they sold out instantly. 50 of them gone. It's the same issue. It's just the jacket patch on a neckerchief, and man, is it big. So the youth came up to us and said, hey, we want more neckerchiefs. So we decided to take another patch that we were thinking about using as a jacket patch design eventually and make a new Lodge neckerchief. You can see there on the bottom right, that just came out at our September weekend they had at Heritage Reservation last month, and it will be sold at the Lodge banquet. There were 150 of both of these made, and they were just made as generic trading post items for the Lodge. So chapter issues. Allohak Menewi has had a couple different chapters. When the council first became a new council from the merger of Greater Pittsburgh and Penns Woods, they organized their districts into areas. Some of the areas had 2 districts, some had 3, and the chapters were broken up by those areas rather than by district like they had formerly used. The first chapter was Nishnawbat chapter, which was area 2. That's my home area, my home chapter. It's from the Seneca district and Beaver Valley district. They were one of the first 3 chapters to make a patch. Niamat-Washachu means Brothers of the Woods, and it covers the entire former territory of the Natchitoches Lodge. On the right side, in the center right, you see Chartiers Creek chapter. They were area 4. They covered 3 districts, Frontier, Mingo Trails, and General Green, which was mostly Washington and Greene counties, so the former territory of the Chemolis Lodge. Those 3 chapters were the first to make a patch. A little bit later, Mohican chapter, which covered the former territory of the Tanacharison Lodge and a little bit of Cayuga, made their patch, and they threw a little homage to Tanacharison by putting the wolf on their patch. Area 5 for the Laurel Highlands Council was our Scout Reach Trailblazer District and the chapter that employees would be in, or council volunteers. They never made a patch. They still haven't made a patch. They're called Area 5, Chapter 5 in the Lodge admin portals and all that, and they've never made a patch. A little bit after the original run of chapter chevrons were made, Monongahela South chapter made a patch. And the lodge did have a rule where they said no former totems on patches. Well, Chartiers Creek broke that rule, then Mohican broke that rule, and Monongahela South chapter just went all out and put almost every totem from lodges that were in their chapter territory, which it isn't 100% accurate. And it's made from a different company than the first four patches. The first four were made from Raven Associates, and they fit really well with the original standard. The Mon South one, it fits with it. It kind of lines up, but you can tell the artwork's very different. The embroidery is different because it was a different company. 2014, we absorbed the Ottaquag Lodge, as mentioned before. They make a Ottaquag chapter patch, which covers the entire territory of Ottaquag Lodge. And the artwork on that one fits really well with our Centennial Standard flap. The only thing to note on this patch, the lodge name is misspelled. This patch was being used up until April of this year when they ran out. And word on the street was they were talking about designing a new one. At Washoe chapter ran out of their patches a while ago and decided that they were going to make a patch that would fit with the new standard lodge flap. So they did the two, Order of the Arrow Brothers standing by a fire. And if you hold it up to the current standard flap, the smoke turns into the mountain lion head. 2020, 2021 Mohican chapter is dissolved. It was a very inactive chapter. It had two districts. What they decided to do was take the Japichan district and send it to the northern side of the lodge with Nishinamat chapter, and the southern district went with Monongahela South chapter. Nishinamat means two brothers. They had two brothers on their standard patch because of the two districts. And they decided that the lodge name or chapter name didn't fit anymore. So they had a vote and they changed their name to Peliniku chapter, which means flying squirrel. It's kind of funny. It's my home chapter. And when we picked Nishinamat, flying squirrel chapter or Peliniku was actually the second option. It almost made it originally, but they didn't pick it till 2021. We decided to make a round patch. That way, if the standard lodge flap happened to change or something, we could still keep the same sort of emblem. On the right side of the screen, Peliniku chapter has a neckerchief. It was made and given to the chapter leadership for its first year. There were 35 of them made. It's a standard BSA neckerchief with the iron-on decal. That's a tougher item, and there are still people looking for it. So now we're going to get to some fun stuff. We're talking prototypes and unofficial issues. And oh boy, does Allohak Menewi have a lot of some unofficial stuff and prototypes. We're going to start with the top left. It appears to be our standard flap, but it actually has a red mylar border. When the standard flap was ordered, the Key 3 got together and decided that they were going to make a Key 3 thank you flap for them to hand out to people who had given some extraordinary service to the lodge. At the time, the lodge didn't have any administrative rules or any bylaws yet. We were still fairly new and working on it. So it was okay. And it was approved by the lodge chief. It was his idea. He was a youth. He wanted to do it. But there were some members who didn't agree and said it should have gone to the executive committee. So all the flaps were recollected from people they were handed out to and presumed destroyed, but some of them have gotten their way around. I got lucky. I ended up picking up one, and I know a couple other collectors have gotten them too. It's really tough to tell the difference. It's like red mylar thread mixed in with a regular red thread. So unless they're right next to each other, you really can't tell the difference. On the center of the screen, we see a council patch. It says Scouting for Food. Next to the Scouting for Food can, you see a OA arrowhead that's ghosted. This was made by the council for the OA because it was the 30th anniversary of Scouting for Food in 2016. So they made a big push. They said everybody who brings at least 10 cans of food to the next service weekend would get this patch. And the chapter that collected the most got like a free pizza party. There are some guys who argued that it wasn't made by the lodge and, council just did it. So it's not a lodge issue, even though it was solely issued at an OA event and it was handed out by the staff advisor. I'm on the side of it is a lodge issue, but we don't consider it a lodge issue just because some people, it's a little controversial. Similar to the 2015 Friends of Scouting patch, it's got the Centennial logo on it. There are some guys in the lodge that say it's a lodge issue for that reason. There are others that say it's not because it was made by the council. I have one in my collection with the lodge stuff just because of the Centennial logo. There are a lot of people that do that, but still not a lodge issue. Below that, on the left side of the screen, we see that generic Era Tour patch. I'm sure there's tons of camps and tons of lodges that have it. There's a couple Allohak Menewi ones floating around, as well as some Heritage Scout Reservation ones, which is actually the wrong name. They just go by Heritage Reservation. They don't have Scout in it. They were made, I think, by the SG Trading Post Company. You could go on their website and you could type in what you would want on the patch and they would make it. So I know there's a lot for the Southern region and there's tons of camp names, there's council names. I've seen one that says Wu-Tang Clan on it before. It was just kind of a free-for-all on what ended up on those patches. So they're kind of unofficial issues. Center of the screen, the Lodge History Committee was doing a lot of digging after 2015, trying to beef up the history book and learn as much as we can. And what we discovered was the Kuionic Lodge was actually first known as Umsteader Lodge, named after the camp. They changed the name right before the lodge charter, but as a little just neat thing, we put a couple in the lodge auction just to get some more funds for our youth going to NOAC. We made the Umsteader Lodge round. It's based off of the Kuionic round. All this one is a piece of printed canvas with a rolled edge. And we sort of made it as like an unofficial filler for the lodge history set that we sold in 2018 from NOAC. That was made in 2020, shortly after we discovered the Umsteader name. On the right side of the screen, we're going to see a whole lot of prototypes. You remember me talking about the monstrosity that was the historic set fiasco, and they never sent artwork, they just started making prototypes. Here's a few of them here. You can see the Kayasutha prototype, absolutely horrendous compared to the final product. The Anarchist Lodge Arrowhead prototype doesn't even have the right chipmunk on it. I don't know where they got that one from compared to the artwork that was sent. We got the wrong background on Scararati's flap. We've got the wrong ears on Kuionics. And it's tough to see in the picture, but the Shamalis flaps, both those prototypes are different. They kept putting an Ornette arrowhead on it. We kept telling them, don't make it fancy, just make it solid. And then for some odd reason on the bottom prototype, the shaft of the arrow is like half gray. So not official issues, they're prototypes. There was a whole mess with that one. The patch you see that has the 5th anniversary with the tag on it that says sample, that was the prototype for the most common 5th anniversary flap. We have a prototype for the black background one too, but it was given to the lodge chief who helped design it. The difference between that prototype and the actual product was the actual issue was a twill background, and the prototype showed up with solid embroidery. We had them correct the change, and they were issued. In the bottom middle of the screen, we see a prototype for the 2018 NOAC. It looks a lot like our delegate flap, but you notice on the left it has the camp logo. The Conclave Host Lodge staff flap had the camp logo on it, but all the text was supposed to be in yellow. Nobody has this one in their hands. It resides with the company. They sent it to us because we were trying to rush to get it made, and they said, hey, we realized that the text is the wrong color on this one, but we promise it'll be yellow. Is it good to go? We said yes. They made it. They showed up. They were yellow. Everybody rejoiced. On the far right side of the screen, right above the Kayasutha historic flap, you see a 2022 NOAC flap. I've always been one when I order patches that if it's a 2-piece lodge flap, I want to see a physical sample in my hand to see how it lines up. Because I think 2-piece lodge flaps are really pretty, but I live by the method that if you can take a 2-piece lodge flap and throw the bottom out and the top still looks good, then you've designed a good 2-piece set. I asked for prototypes to be sent to the council office, and what I ended up getting was 10 prototypes of just the top flap, no bottom, and they had a white border on it. Not at all what I asked for. I ended up getting the right prototypes. They looked good. They were exactly what we made. But this white border flap, there were 10 of them made, so I have one. The lodge maintained 2 of them in their records, and the other remaining 7 were handed out to the lodge chief and guys who helped plan and fundraise and make some donations to get the guys to NOAC. So not an official issue. It's one of the prototypes, but there are 10 of them out there compared to most other prototypes. Right here, we have a bunch of unofficial stuff. Most of these are district or council events that have OA service team or OA on it. They're not approved by the lodge. They were never even asked. They just made them. The 10 Commandment hike happens every year in November, right around Thanksgiving. I believe it's on Black Friday every year. And it's a huge event. We have a council, Laurel Highlands Council. They tour around to all these different churches in Pittsburgh, any different religion, any denomination. And it's all about, being reverent and learning about different religions. We do have an OA service team that gets together every year, and they help put on the event. And the chairman of the event has been making a patch for them almost every year since it's 2010, I think was the first year they made a patch for it. He never asked permission for the lodge. Usually it's just a different color border and it says OA service team on it. So unofficial issue, but I try to pick them up when I can because I'm a purist. I got to have everything that mentions OA from the council. The bottom of the screen, you see a wooden flap. That's our centennial flap. Those were made as just a handout by the lodge trading post advisor. He had a CNC machine. He likes to make projects like that. I don't remember how many of them were made, but they were all individually numbered on the back. On the top right of the screen, you see a flap that has a bunch of different lodge numbers on it. Dave Sass, everybody in Allohak Menewi knows David Sass. And it just so happened that 2019 was his 50th year of being an Eagle Scout and being in the OA. And he's like, I really want to make a patch. And I said, Dr. Sass, I think I can help you with that. So we designed up this patch together, and he's like, I want reference to all the lodges I've been in on it. He has always been in the same area, McKeesport, but look at how many lodge numbers. He starts out with 497 with Shingus, then he's in Skarati 130, he's in Tanacharis in 67, Endalakahani 57, and Allohak Menewi 57. So it's an unofficial issue, but if you're a purist and you collect all those lodges, you got to have a Dave Sass flap. No money was made off of these. Dave hands them out to all his scouting friends. Just a little thing he made to celebrate. And it also mentions Troop 99 in Mount Vernon, down near the Youghiogheny River, which is the troop he got his Eagle Scout at. And I believe one of the members of the call on here tonight, Brian Johnson, is a member of Troop 99. So you see a red 5th anniversary flap right there. Yep, same standard 5th anniversary flap. We got tons of them. Well, this one, right below the back of the arrow in the 57, has a stamp that says Camp Conestoga, Westmoreland, Fayette. That's not our council camp. That's actually a Waggy on lodges, but there were guys in our summer camp who had those flaps, and they were stamping them and doing all kinds of stuff. And I managed to pick one up, and I just thought it was funny, so I kept it. The bottom right of the screen, you see the Seneca District OA 57 patch. It's our Klondike Derby. That's my home district, and the Klondike Derby chairman that year made a patch to recognize the OA guys who come and help with setup for the Klondike, and they run the sled weigh-in. And there were some guys walking around, they sewed the patch on this black and white neckerchief, and others just had it, hanging on the zipper of their winter coat and then on their uniform. I'm not sure how many of them were made, but it's an unofficial district issue for the OA. We've got more here, more unofficial stuff. We got another 10 Commandment hikes patch. Should say the annual 15th, cross out, 15, and there's 10 commandments. If you ever heard that Bible story there where one of the tablets was destroyed and they couldn't remember what commandments were on it. We have a leather patch made by the same guy who would make the wooden flaps. He also makes a light up flap too. It's just a piece of plexiglass with the lodge standard etched in it. It's pretty neat. Bottom right, we've got another 10 Commandment OA Service Corps patch, and that one is from 2019. It has the Stronger Than Hate emblem from when the Pittsburgh unfortunately had a shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. The guy who designed the Stronger Than Hate logo, basing it off the Steelers logo and the Star of David, he's actually a vigil member from the lodge and was one of the speakers at the event. The neckerchief you see, Camp Anawanna, the Crick Social, Chartiers Creek chapter always has an event in the spring called the Crick Social. Crick is the Pittsburghese slang for a creek or a small stream. And the one year they had these iron-on decals. Kids, we were putting them on T-shirts and all that. Kids had neckerchiefs, and I brought a bunch of blank neckerchiefs down, and it was just one of the activities they did. Not an official issue, but just something neat. The big vigil triangle you see here, unofficial lodge emblem. Some of the guys or some lodges in the BSA have a vigil patch just like this. These are made in the US by Destry Haltford. It's an awesome patch. I had one made when he offered to make off one, single runoffs of them. It's a 10-inch chenille, and it's eye-catching. It looks awesome. I recommend that if anybody's looking to get a made in the US chenille, they talk to him. I was extremely thrilled with the results of this, but this is a one of a kind, so it goes into the unofficial category. Um, that's 10 years of Allohak Menewi stuff. I mean, there's a lot of patches, a lot of history. I could talk for hours about all the designs that went into this and the hours we spent at camp debating about it, and the, you know, EC meetings that made you want to pull your hair out, but it's, we wouldn't change it for the world. And this is everything we have made. And this is our 10th year. So thanks for listening, guys. And, we'll see you at the next 10 years of Allohak Menewi.